It was 1:45 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time on May 15, 1932, and the air inside the Polar Star's control gondola held the sharp, metallic scent of cold radio equipment. Outside, at exactly 90 degrees north latitude, the endless white of the polar ice caps stretched in every direction under a pale sun that offered no warmth. 6 men moved about their tasks, having just secured the 85-meter airship to the ice with anchor lines. The final radio transmission crackled out into the ether, reporting samples secured and preparations for departure. Then only the hum of the empty frequency remained.
When search planes arrived 5 days later, they found the landing site perfectly preserved. Anchor lines still fastened, scientific equipment deployed, a small tent standing. But the Polar Star and its 6-man crew were gone, vanished from the face of the ice without a single trace.
Welcome to the last expedition. Tonight, we reconstruct the 1932 Ellsworth Trans-Arctic Airship Expedition. 6 men, 1 airship, a successful landing at the North Pole, and then a disappearance so complete it defied all aerial investigation. While many know of the Italia disaster, few recall the American Polar Star that vanished after achieving its goal. If this is your first time with us, subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover a new doomed expedition every Monday and Thursday. Let's begin. Lincoln Ellsworth was a man defined by what lay beyond the horizon. By 1932, at age 52, he had already crossed the Atlantic by airship and attempted multiple polar flights. His fortune, inherited from his father, a wealthy industrialist, funded not just adventures but a specific vision to prove the airship as the ultimate vehicle for Arctic science. This was not merely about reaching the pole. That had been done by air before. It was about stopping there, landing on the shifting, treacherous ice of 90 degrees north, collecting tangible data from the top of the world, and returning. A mobile, floating laboratory that could descend from the sky. The vessel for this ambition was the Polar Star, an American-built dirigible, 85 meters from nose to tail, its silvery envelope filled not with flammable hydrogen but with safer, scarcer helium. It was purchased and outfitted specifically for Ellsworth's expedition. The control gondola, slung beneath the giant gas bag, housed the bridge, living quarters, and a compact laboratory. Its planned payload was meticulously calculated. 200 liters of fuel for the twin Maybach engines, provisions for 12 days, a 50% safety margin over the planned 8-day mission, and precisely 220 kilograms of scientific equipment. Ellsworth assembled a crew of 5 others, each chosen for expertise that complemented his leadership and funding. The pilot was Bernt Balchen, a Norwegian aviator already legendary in Arctic circles for his role in earlier expeditions. His hands knew the peculiarities of polar navigation, where magnetic compasses fail and the sun circles a flat, white horizon. The scientific team consisted of 3 men: Dr. Arthur V. Wilkins, a geologist, Dr. Samuel G. Bentley, a meteorologist, and Dr. Henry C. Forbes, a glaciologist. Their mission was to drill ice cores, measure atmospheric conditions, and collect geological samples from the pole itself. The 6th man was James R. Holden, the radio operator, tasked with maintaining the vital link to the monitoring station in Longyearbyen, Spitsbergen.
The declared flight plan filed with the Norwegian authorities was precise. Depart Longyearbyen, Spitsbergen, at 78 degrees 13 minutes north, 15 degrees 33 minutes east. Fly a direct Great Circle route north-northwest to the geographic North Pole, a distance of approximately 100 kilometers. Land, deploy ice anchors, and conduct scientific operations for a window of 6 to 8 hours. Then, lift off and return via a slightly different route, mapping uncharted ice fields. Total elapsed time: 48 to 60 hours of flight, plus the landing interval.
The equipment loadout reflected the dual nature of the mission. Alongside the standard navigation gear, a sun compass, sextants, drift indicators were the scientific tools. A lightweight, steam-driven ice coring drill capable of extracting a 2-meter core, atmospheric sampling balloons, thermographs, and specially designed specimen containers. For survival, should a forced landing occur away from the pole, they carried a sled, fur sleeping bags, and rations for 30 days. A curious, almost optimistic addition was a small collapsible boat, a contingency for an emergency landing on open water leads in the ice. Funding came entirely from Ellsworth's personal fortune, estimated to have allocated over $250,000 for the acquisition and modification of the Polar Star alone. There was no government backing, no corporate sponsorship beyond the supply contracts. This was a private scientific endeavor, though Ellsworth knew the publicity value of success. The world was still captivated by polar exploration. A successful landing and return from the pole would be a monumental coup for American aviation and science. On the morning of May 10, 1932, the Polar Star floated at its mooring mast in Longyearbyens Harbor. The air was cold, just below freezing, with a light wind from the east. The final checks were made. Fuel tanks were topped off to the last liter. The scientific instruments were secured in the gondola. The crew boarded. Ellsworth, Balchen, the three scientists, and Holden, the harbor master, a Norwegian named Erik Thorsen, oversaw the final cast-off. He later reported the mood was businesslike, focused. There were no grand speeches. Balchen started the engines, their deep thrum echoing off the surrounding mountains. Mooring lines were released.
Ellsworth's last recorded words to Thorsen were, "We will send word when we are on the ice."
The great silver shape lifted slowly, nose turning to the north. It gained altitude, becoming a speck against the gray sky, then vanishing into the low cloud. Erik Thorsen was the last person on land to see the Polar Star and its 6 crewmen alive. He watched until there was nothing left to see, then turned back to his logbook to record the departure time, 8:17 local time. The plan was now in motion. A direct line to the pole. A landing on the most remote point on Earth. A collection of knowledge from a place few had even flown over. Everything was calculated, prepared, and accounted for. If you were the harbor master who watched that airship sail into the Arctic haze, knowing the immense risk of the undertaking, would you have tried to stop them? Let me know in the comments. One detail, noted almost in passing by Thorsen in his log, would later return to haunt the investigation. The wind at departure was a steady 15 knots from the east, standard for Spitsbergen, unremarkable. But it meant the Polar Star lifted off into a gentle, consistent breeze, a fact that would later clash violently with the scene found at the landing site. The Polar Star's journey north from Spitsbergen began under conditions that could only be described as ideal for Arctic airship travel. The first radio transmission came at 14:30 Greenwich Mean Time on May 10th, just over 6 hours after departure. James Holden's voice was clear and measured, reporting position at 80 degrees 15 N, 18 degrees 40 feet E, altitude 600 meters, airspeed 85 kilometers per hour. The twin Maybach engines were performing within expected parameters. Outside temperature, -18 Celsius. Wind, light and variable. The Great Circle route was holding true. Over the next 4 days, the transmissions followed a precise, almost monotonous pattern. Every 6 hours, Holden would relay coordinates, weather observations, and brief status updates. The entries from the ship's log, later reconstructed from these radio reports, paint a picture of a mission proceeding exactly to plan. May 11th, 2000 Greenwich Mean Time. Position 83 degrees 47 N, 22 degrees 10 feet E. Fuel consumption, 9% of total, matching projections. May 12th, 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. Position 86 degrees 12 N, 25 degrees 55 E. Minor course correction of 3 degrees west to compensate for a slight easterly drift. Temperature had dropped to -24 Celsius, but the helium in the envelope contracted predictably, requiring only minor valving to maintain lift.
The meteorological log, transmitted in fragments, recorded atmospheric pressure at 1013 millibars, visibility unlimited under the perpetual polar day, and cloud cover at 2/8, scattered cirrus. The scientific team reported preliminary atmospheric samples collected via balloon at 1,000 and 3,000 meters, showing expected composition.
By May 13th, the routine was established. The transmissions grew slightly more frequent as they approached the pole. At 2 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time on May 14th, position 88 degrees 30 N, 30 degrees 10 feet E. Balchen reported using the sun compass exclusively now. The magnetic compass had become useless so close to the magnetic pole, its needle wandering aimlessly. The sextant readings were cross-checked every hour. The ice below was described as mostly solid pack, with occasional leads of open water, none wider than 50 meters. The small boat, stowed in the gondola, remained unused. Then, on the morning of May 15th, the transmissions shifted tone. At 9 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, position 89 degrees 48 N, indeterminate longitude, so close to the pole that longitudinal lines converged to meaninglessness. Ellsworth himself came on the radio, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of anticipation. Pole in sight. Beginning descent preparations. The planned landing window was opening. At 10:14 Greenwich Mean Time, the transmission that would be celebrated in newspapers worldwide if the expedition had returned. North Pole reached. Coordinates 90 degrees 00 N. Commencing landing sequence. The airship began its gentle descent. Engines throttled back to idle. Balchen, a master of Arctic aviation, guided the 85-meter craft downward. The landing procedure had been drilled for months in simulations. Deploy the ice anchors, heavy, spiked hooks on cables, to secure the nose and tail, then slowly valve helium to settle the gondola onto the ice.
At 11:30 Greenwich Mean Time, transmission. Landing successful. Anchors secured at 4 points. Gondola on ice. Commencing scientific operations. The coordinates were reconfirmed. 90 degrees 00 N. Outside temperature, -29 Celsius. Wind, calm, estimated at less than 5 knots from the northwest. Visibility, 15 kilometers.
For the next 2 hours, the radio fell silent except for brief automated check-ins every 30 minutes. A simple carrier wave pulse to confirm the transmitter was active. The monitoring station in Longyearbyen logged each one. The crew was on the ice. Dr. Wilkins, the geologist, would be overseeing the ice coring drill, aiming for a core at least 2 meters deep to capture centuries of climate data. Dr. Bentley, the meteorologist, would be launching more atmospheric balloons, recording temperature and pressure gradients. Dr. Forbes, the glaciologist, would be examining surface ice crystals and collecting snow samples. Ellsworth and Balchen likely remained in the gondola, monitoring the airship's trim and preparing for departure. Holden manned the radio. Then, at 13:45 Greenwich Mean Time, a longer transmission. Holden's voice again, but this time with a note of completion. Scientific samples secured. Ice core extracted. Length 2.1 meters. Atmospheric data collected. All equipment stowed. Preparing for departure. Estimate liftoff in 30 minutes. The message was acknowledged by Longyearbyen. Standard procedure. The final transmission came exactly at 14:45 Greenwich Mean Time, 1 hour after the previous update. It was brief, almost curt. Preparing for departure. Engines starting. Will report airborne. The operator in Longyearbyen acknowledged. And then, nothing.
No further transmissions. No carrier wave pulses. No distress signal. Just the empty, humming static of the Arctic radio band. That was the last transmission anyone ever heard from them.
Before we go deeper into what they found, one quick thing. If this story's got you, hit subscribe. We cover a new doomed expedition every Thursday. And drop a comment. What would you have done if you'd been the radio operator in Longyearbyen, hearing that final message and then only silence? Back to the ice. It's now May 16th, and the planned return window has come and gone. In Longyearbyen, concern began as a slow, creeping unease. The Polar Star's flight plan called for a return to Spitsbergen by the evening of May 16th at the latest, accounting for the 6 to 8 hour landing window. By 1800 Greenwich Mean Time on May 16th, there was no sign of the airship on the horizon. No radio contact. The monitoring station attempted hails every 15 minutes, increasing power to the transmitter. No response. Weather reports from ships in the Barents Sea and remote Arctic stations showed nothing unusual for the region. A high-pressure system dominated the area between the pole and Spitsbergen. Winds were light, generally under 10 knots. Visibility was good. No storms, no sudden temperature plunges beyond the normal -25 to -30 Celsius range. The conditions were, by all accounts, perfect for airship travel. By the morning of May 17th, concern turned to alarm. The Polar Star carried fuel for approximately 60 hours of flight at cruising speed. Even with a conservative estimate, they should have been within radio range by now. The Norwegian authorities were alerted. Ellsworth's family in New York was notified via telegram. The first search planes, 2 Norwegian Air Force MF-11 seaplanes, were scrambled from Spitsbergen, but their range was limited. They could only scout the southern edges of the planned return route.
The last confirmed sighting of the Polar Star by any external source was a Norwegian sealing vessel, the Hvalfangst, at approximately 82 degrees 10 N, 20 degrees 05 E on May 11th. The ship's log notes: observed airship on northerly heading, altitude approx. 500 meters, moving steadily. No signals exchanged. This placed the Polar Star exactly on its planned course, 2 days after departure.
As days passed, the silence grew heavier. Search planes expanded their grids, flying north along the meridian of the planned return route. They saw nothing but endless, unbroken pack ice. No wreckage, no debris field, no dark smudge of a crash site against the white. No signal flares, no survivors waving from the ice. The Polar Star, with its 6 crew and its precious scientific cargo, had vanished from the skies and the ice as completely as if it had never existed. And then, on May 20th, a search plane, piloted by Norwegian aviator Gunnar Isaacson, reached the coordinates of the North Pole itself. Flying at low altitude, he spotted something on the ice below, a dark, geometric pattern against the white. He circled, descending to 100 meters. What he saw would become the central, baffling artifact of the entire mystery. The landing site was there, exactly as described in the final transmissions. 4 ice anchor lines, still secured to the ice, their spikes driven deep. The anchors themselves were of a unique, custom design, triple fluked with a locking mechanism, used only by the Polar Star. They were intact, undamaged. Nearby, a small, collapsible tent stood, its canvas flapping gently in the light wind. Scientific equipment was deployed, the steam-driven ice coring drill, its boiler cold, but positioned over a freshly drilled hole. Atmospheric balloon launch apparatus, specimen containers, some of them filled with ice and snow samples, neatly sealed. But there was no airship, no gondola, no wreckage, no signs of fire or explosion. The ice around the site was smooth, unbroken. No skid marks from an emergency takeoff. No impact craters. The tent and equipment showed no damage from being dragged or abandoned hastily. It looked, for all the world, as if the crew had simply stepped away for a moment, intending to return. Isaacson landed his ski-equipped plane nearby. He and his observer examined the site. The temperature was -27 Celsius. The wind was a gentle 8 knots from the north-northwest, almost identical to the conditions reported in the final transmission. They found footprints in the snow, leading from the tent area to where the gondola would have rested, but they were blurred by wind drift, impossible to count or track with certainty. Inside the tent, they found a thermos of cold coffee, a pair of fur mittens, and a partially filled logbook page. The last entry was a meteorological reading timed at 13:30 Greenwich Mean Time on May 15th, just before the final transmission.
The log entry read, wind NNW 5 knots, temp -29 C, Pressure steady. Ice core extraction complete. All samples cataloged. Ready for departure.
Isaacson radioed his discovery back to Spitsbergen. The message was relayed to New York, to London, to Oslo. The world now knew the polar star had reached the pole. It had landed successfully, it had completed its scientific mission. And then, under calm skies and gentle winds, with its anchors still secured to the ice and its equipment deployed, it had lifted off and disappeared without a trace. No distress call. No wreckage, no bodies, just an empty landing site at the top of the world, and a mystery that would hang in the cold Arctic air for decades. The discovery of the polar star's landing site on May 20th, 1932, should have provided answers. Instead, it presented a series of contradictions that deepened the mystery with each examined detail. The Norwegian search team, led by Gunnar Isaacson, documented everything with forensic precision. The 4 custom ice anchors remained driven into the ice, their locking mechanisms still engaged. The anchor cables, however, told a different story. They were not cut or severed. They had been disconnected from the airship's attachment points using the proper release mechanisms, a deliberate, controlled action. But the cables showed no signs of being dragged or stressed, as if the airship had lifted away vertically, with minimal tension.
The ice coring drill was positioned over a borehole exactly 2.1 meters deep, matching the final transmission. The drill's steam boiler was cold, its fuel tank still containing 15 liters of kerosene, enough for at least 2 more hours of operation. The core sample itself was missing from its designated storage container.
The small tent stood intact, its canvas undamaged. Inside, investigators found the thermos of coffee, the fur mittens, and the logbook, with its final entry timed at 13:30 Greenwich Mean Time. But the logbook's preceding pages, which should have contained detailed scientific observations from the landing period, were torn out. Only the cover page and the final entry remained. The tent's stove was cold, yet a half-empty packet of tea and 2 sugar cubes were laid neatly on a folding table, as if someone had been interrupted mid-preparation. Footprints around the site were numerous, but blurred by wind drift, making individual tracks impossible to count. However, Isaacson's team made a plaster cast of one clear print near the tent entrance. It matched the standard-issue boot provided to the expedition's scientists, but the pattern showed the wearer was standing still, facing the tent, not walking toward or away from the gondola's presumed location. The ice around the landing site was smooth and unbroken, with no skid marks, no impact scars, and no evidence of a hurried or emergency departure. Yet the final transmission stated the engines were starting, a process that should have left at least some disturbance in the snow from propeller wash. Weather records from the period presented another layer of contradiction. The Norwegian Meteorological Institute compiled data from ships, remote stations, and the search planes themselves. For May 15th, the date of the disappearance, conditions at the North Pole were logged as calm. Winds under 10 knots, temperature steady at -28 to -30 Celsius, visibility over 10 kilometers, no precipitation. But the last atmospheric balloon launched by the Polar Star's science team, recovered from the site, contained a data capsule. Its recorded pressure reading showed a rapid drop of 12 millibars in the hour preceding the final transmission, a sign of an approaching weather front that ground-based stations did not detect.
The most unsettling contradiction lay in the anchor lines themselves. Forensic analysis showed they had been released in sequence, first the 2 forward anchors, then the 2 aft anchors, with approximately 3 minutes between each release. This matched the standard, careful procedure for a planned departure. But the ice around the anchor spikes showed no melting or deformation from the airship's engines running at liftoff power, which would have been necessary to overcome the inertia of the secured craft. It was as if the Polar Star had become weightless or had never been anchored at all.
Subsequent searches over the following weeks covered more than 10,000 square miles of Arctic Ocean and pack ice. Norwegian and American aircraft flew grid patterns, ships patrolled the ice edge, and even submarines were dispatched to scan the seabed. They found nothing. No wreckage, no debris field, No fuel slicks on open water leads. No distress signals captured by any listening post. The Polar Star, an 85-meter airship with a metallic framework and a volume of 85,000 cubic meters, had vanished from a zone of perfect visibility. But the search planes did note one anomaly: a series of faint, parallel pressure ridges in the ice, approximately 50 kilometers southeast of the landing site, aligned in a pattern inconsistent with normal ice movement. No wreckage was found there, but the ridges suggested a possible low-altitude disturbance. Official reports from the Norwegian and American investigative boards, released in late 1932, concluded the most likely scenario was a catastrophic structural failure shortly after liftoff, causing the airship to break apart and sink in open water. They cited the pressure drop recorded by the balloon as possible evidence of sudden, severe weather that overwhelmed the craft. But this conclusion did not match the physical evidence at the landing site. The orderly disconnection of anchors, the intact equipment, the missing log pages, and the absence of any debris along the projected departure route. If the airship broke apart, why were no fragments ever found, even on the ice? If it sank in open water, why did subsequent sonar sweeps of the likely areas reveal nothing? Which contradiction is most convincing to you? The deliberate anchor release versus the lack of engine marks? The missing log pages versus the neat camp? The weather balloon data versus the official records? Drop it below before we get to Act 4. One final detail emerged from the laboratory analysis of the items left at the site. The coffee in the thermos was tested and found to contain a normal concentration of caffeine, no contaminants. The fur mittens showed no signs of wear or haste, but the ice core sample, noted as secured in the final transmission, was absent. Its storage container was found empty, yet sealed. The borehole was measured precisely at 2.1 meters deep, and drill cuttings were present, confirming extraction. But the core itself, the primary scientific objective of the mission, was gone. No trace of it was ever found, not at the site, not in any subsequent discovery. It had vanished as completely as the airship that carried it. The disappearance of the Polar Star remains one of the Arctic's most perplexing aviation mysteries. With no wreckage, no bodies, and a perfectly preserved landing site, investigators were left with only theories. Three main lines of inquiry emerged, each attempting to reconcile the contradictions found on the ice. The first and most widely accepted theory involves a cascade of mechanical and environmental failures. This reconstruction begins with the rapid pressure drop recorded by the Polar Star's own weather balloon, a 12 millibar decrease in 1 hour. While ground stations reported calm conditions, this data suggests the airship may have lifted off into a developing, localized weather system not visible from the surface. Such systems can create sudden, violent downdrafts known as microbursts in polar regions. One line of investigation suggests that as the Polar Star ascended, it encountered severe icing. The airship's envelope, despite its helium fill, could accumulate significant ice on its outer surface and control surfaces. At the low temperatures of -29 Celsius, ice buildup would have been rapid. Combined with the downdraft from the pressure drop, this could have caused a catastrophic loss of lift. The airship might have descended uncontrollably, striking the ice some distance from the landing site. The parallel pressure ridges found 50 kilometers southeast could mark such an impact zone.
A 1933 technical analysis by the American Bureau of Aeronautics noted that the Polar Star's design, while advanced, had a known vulnerability. Ice accumulation on the upper tail fins could alter trim dramatically at low airspeeds during ascent.
If the airship broke apart on impact with the ice, the debris field might have been quickly covered by snowdrift or swallowed by a lead of open water. The Arctic pack ice is constantly moving. A wreckage site could have drifted dozens of kilometers in the days before search planes arrived. This theory explains the absence of wreckage, but struggles with the orderly anchor release and the missing ice core sample. The second theory focuses on navigation failure and a fatal course error. After liftoff from the pole, the crew would have relied entirely on celestial navigation and sun compass readings. In the perpetual daylight of polar summer, With featureless white terrain below, spatial disorientation is a documented risk even for experienced pilots. An ex-investigator speaking anonymously in a 1934 aviation journal proposed that the polar star might have suffered a critical instrument failure shortly after departure. The sun compass, essential for polar navigation, could have been damaged or misaligned during the landing operations. With no visual references, the airship might have flown a gradual, undetected curve away from its intended southerly route towards Spitsbergen.
Norwegian search planes noted in their reports that magnetic anomalies in the region between 85 degrees north and 80 degrees north could cause compass deviations of up to 30 degrees, enough to put an aircraft hundreds of kilometers off course over several hours of flight.
If the polar star flew east or west instead of south, it could have eventually run out of fuel over the vast, empty expanses of the Arctic Ocean or the Greenland Sea. A controlled ditching in open water would leave little trace, especially if the airship's buoyancy chambers kept it afloat temporarily before sinking. This theory accounts for the lack of wreckage on land, but doesn't explain why no distress signal was sent as fuel ran low.
The third and most speculative theory involves internal conflict or critical system failure that prevented communication. Some historians point to the torn-out logbook pages and the missing ice core as evidence that something occurred during the landing that the crew did not want recorded. The most controversial theory proposes that a dispute arose over the scientific findings or the decision to depart, escalating to the point where radio communication was deliberately disabled.
This line of thinking suggests the polar star might have taken off normally, but then experienced a failure in its electrical system, possibly from the static electricity buildup common in dry, cold Arctic air. A spark could have damaged the radio transmitter without causing a fire. With no ability to communicate, the crew might have attempted to follow an alternate, pre-planned emergency route not disclosed in the official flight plan. There were rumors, never substantiated, that Ellsworth had discussed with Balchen the possibility of attempting a trans-Arctic crossing to Alaska if conditions permitted. Such a flight would have taken them over thousands of kilometers of uncharted territory. If they attempted this and failed, the wreckage could lie anywhere between the pole and the Alaskan coast, an area so vast it has never been systematically searched. A variation of this theory involves contaminated provisions. The coffee thermos tested clean, but other food or water supplies could have been tainted, causing illness or impaired judgment during the critical departure phase. However, no evidence supports this, and the orderly nature of the landing site argues against sudden incapacitation. Each theory has its proponents and its flaws. The mechanical failure theory best fits the physical evidence, but cannot explain the deliberate anchor release. The navigation error theory accounts for the lack of wreckage, but not the absence of any radio communication during what would have been hours of flight time. The internal conflict or alternate route theory is the darkest, but lacks any corroborating evidence beyond the anomalies at the site. Which of these three theories do you think is closest to the truth? The mechanical cascade, the navigational error, or the speculative internal scenario? The answer may lie somewhere between them, or in a combination of factors no investigator has yet imagined. The polar star took its secrets with it into the Arctic silence, leaving only a perfectly preserved landing site, and questions that have lingered for nearly a century. The official search for the polar star was called off on July 30, 1932. The 6 men, Lincoln Ellsworth, Bernt Balchen, Arthur Wilkins, Samuel Bentley, Henry Forbes, and James Holden, were declared lost, presumed dead. Ellsworth's family funded private aerial searches until 1934, covering over 200,000 square kilometers of the Arctic basin. No wreckage was ever found. No bodies were recovered. In 1935, a memorial plaque was installed at the American Museum of Natural History, funded by Ellsworth's estate. It lists the names, dates, and the expedition's sole confirmed achievement. Landed at the North Pole, May 15, 1932. The mystery influenced polar aviation protocols. By 1935, new international regulations mandated dual, independent radio systems on all Arctic flights, and required airships to carry emergency locator beacons that activated upon impact. The use of helium over hydrogen became standard, largely due to the Polar Star's precedent. Yet the case remained officially open with the Norwegian Civil Aviation Authority until 1952, when it was archived as unsolved, no new evidence. In 1998, a Russian icebreaker, the academic Fedorov, conducting seabed mapping in the Arctic Ocean, reported sonar contacts at coordinates 88 degrees 12 N, 65 degrees 30 feet E. The contacts were described as large, metallic, and elongated, resting at a depth of 200 meters. The shape was consistent with an airship's framework. A follow-up survey in 2001 using a remotely operated vehicle found nothing. The area had been scoured by icebergs. The data remains inconclusive, filed in the Russian Arctic Institute's archives under Anomalies, Unidentified. Today, the primary physical artifact from the expedition is not a wreck, but a logbook. The single remaining page from the Polar Star's landing site log, with its final entry dated 1330 Greenwich Mean Time on May 15, 1932, is preserved in a climate-controlled room at the Norwegian Polar Institute in Tromsø. It has been examined by 17 researchers in 92 years.
The last line reads, "Ready for departure."
If you have never heard this story before, you are now the 18th. Before the next expedition, one quick thing. Hit subscribe now. This channel is new. Every subscriber helps keep these stories alive. Turn on the bell. New expedition every Thursday. No exceptions. Drop your theory in the comments. Mechanical failure, navigation error, or something darker? I read everyone. If this one stayed with you, leave a like. The algorithm only knows when you do. On Thursday, the Karluk, 1,200 miles drifting through pack ice, 25 men clinging to the deck, and the captain who walked off alone into the whiteout. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only remembered.